So in our final installment for if statements, we're going to look at else and elif. Now, we have done quite a lot of work on if statements, so I'm not going to go back over all of that. If you're not sure about how to do basic if statements, please do go into some of my other videos. So without any further ado, let's get cracking. So just a little recap, because we're going to be using these later on in the lesson. We have different conditions which we can use inside our if statement, so equals, not equals, less than, greater than, and so on and so forth. Okay, so do make sure that you know these really well, because they are used a lot in programming, not only for if statements but also when we start getting into looping as well. They're used extensively basically. So let's think of this scenario. So imagine this flowchart. So here I've got a flowchart where the first question is a score over 250? Now, if the answer to this question is yes, it's going to go down this way. So it's going to go from the if statement down to displaying amazing. And then it's going to go this way to stop. However, if we say no, it's going to jump to this if statement and then test this one. Is the score over 150? If it is, then it's going to go this way and display good, and then finally go this way. And if the answer is score is over 150 is no, then it's going to display try again, and then finally follow this way around. Now, hopefully you've already noticed that only one of those if statements, one of those displays will ever happen. So if this one runs and it goes to yes, then this one won't run, and so on and so forth. This is the basic premise of elif. So only one of these will ever run, okay? And this is exactly what elif is going to do. So either this one here is going to run, or this one here is going to run. That's a terrible two. It's quite hard to do this in trackball, I'll be honest with you, but there we go. I persevere. So only one of those two is going to run. And now let's consider this last part of it. So if the first if statement doesn't run and the second one doesn't run, then this else will always run afterwards. Okay, so basically it's kind of a fallback. It's our if or else fails kind of thing. And in program we call this else. So if all the conditions are false, then we'll always run the else. Okay, so essentially else is always run when they're false. Let's have a look through the following code. So here I'm asking for a score, which I'm casting into a number and storing in the variable score. And then I'm checking to see if that score is over 250. So the idea being that if you get a score of over 250, you're going to say amazing. If the score is over 150 but below 250, so obviously it's that kind of next rung, we'll say it's good. And if it's under 150, we want to say try again. Now if I run this code and I type in a score of, let's say 170, it's going to say good, which is brilliant, exactly what it should say. If I run it again and I type in the score, I don't know, 50, it says try again. So those two if statements look like they are working fine. The problem comes when I try to put in a score over 250. So let's type in a score of 260, and you see it says amazing as well as good. So what's the problem? Well, the score of 260 is indeed over 250, so it prints out amazing, exactly what we saw. However, this next if statement also runs, and the score is still over 150 because 260 is blatantly bigger than 150, so it prints good as well. So this is a problem. To fix the problem, well, the solution to the problem essentially is to make sure only one of these if statements ever runs. And to do that, we can use something called elif. Now, elif, what it allows you to do is kind of daisy chain if statements together. So basically, think of it more like a fallback. So if this first if statement doesn't work, we try the next one. However, if it did work, we don't try the next one. So let's run this again, and let's type in that score of 260. And you see this time it only runs it once. So essentially, when you have elifs put together, it's the same as saying, was this, or is it this, or is it this, or is it this? It's kind of like that daisy chain of testing if statements out. So it will try the first one. If that doesn't work, it'll try the next one. And if the first time one of them works, it stops testing the rest of them, essentially. Now we can change this again, because here I've got an elif, score is under 150. Essentially, if the score is less than 150, wants to try again. So it's essentially kind of the final fallback, the final result. So if it's not over 250 or over 150, then it's got to be under it, doesn't it? So I can replace this with simply the word else. Else essentially is kind of our final test, our final kind of throwback. If these conditions don't work, and they're all false, then this one is what we run. So it's kind of like this, or is it this, else it will be this. Okay, so that's kind of the English that you'll be using. Let's look at another example. This time I've got a really simple if statement with only two parts. It's got a normal if and it's got an else. So in a normal if t is greater than 5, then it's going to print out yes. Otherwise it's going to print out no. So if I run this code, it will print out yes. And the reason for that is because 8 is bigger than 5. If I change this to be a smaller number and run it, you can see it now says no. So what's happening? Well, first of all, this condition is first tested, okay? If the test is true, then it will run the code inside the if statement, which has been indented in. If the condition is false, however, it will go to the fallback option, the else, and run this code. So it's either this or it's this. So now we've got code which will run when it's true, and code which will run when it's false. And this is quite a common thing to do in programs. So if a condition is true, well, I'm going to do one thing, otherwise it doesn't. I'll give you a more practical example. Let's consider a simple game. Okay, so in the game, you might have lives, and maybe it starts off at 5. And then maybe later on in the code, you have a way of testing to make sure you still have lives. So it might be something like this. If lives is greater than 0, print well done. Otherwise, else, print, can't type today, print game over. Obviously that's very, very simplistic, but actually that if statement is in a lot of games, because if you have no lives, then it's game over. Now it's obviously going to be lots more fancy in the game. We'll have a lot of kind of a sad screen or whatever happens to be, but the principle, the basic idea is exactly the same as this. So if you've got lives, keep playing. If you haven't got lives, stop playing. Okay, so it's got that if else situation, true, false. So let's kind of delve into the else a bit more detail, because I've spoken quite a lot about elif, but you can use else without the elif. So here's a classic example where we have something which it will either be true or false. So if I enter a name, okay, so if a name is something other than an empty string, so just to be really clear, if you ever see two quotation marks next to each other like this with nothing inside it, I've kind of got a little face happening there. That's pretty cool. Anyway, if you ever see that, not the face, obviously, the two quotation marks next to each other, then that basically means empty string, nothing's there. So if I've entered nothing, then it's going to print out this statement. Otherwise, it will say, oh, hi to whomever you've entered. Okay, so this part of the code runs when the first condition is false, essentially. So when the condition is true, this one will run. When the condition is false, this other one will run. So that's really all to it. So now it's time for practice. The kind of knowledge you need for if and elif and else is really straightforward. However, the usage of it is something else entirely, actually being able to actually code it. So I've got two programs you can write. They are just practicing those basic kind of ideas, and what I will do is on my website I will include additional tasks for you to complete with if statements. This is the first time where you might start to find it a bit more difficult. Okay, those of you who are beginner coders may find this a little bit more challenging. We shall see. Anyway, the practical task here is you need to write a program which will say what grade someone gets for a test. So if they get a score of maybe 65, for example, then they will have got a C grade because it's over 63 but below 76. Now to do this, you will use this code pattern on the side here. Okay, using an elif. Okay, you don't need to do anything with ands and ors, and elif will work perfectly well for this one. You will also need to use this code pattern here to get the score in. Okay, notice I've used int here because we're asking for a number, and if you think back to previous lessons where I've talked about the difference between text and numbers, if you didn't cast it to a number and try to do greater than less than, you will get some weird result even if you put quotation marks around the numbers, because you will only ever consider the first digit and never the second one. Anyway, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, try it and see the difference basically. So if you're struggling with the task, here's a little bit more help. What you can do is break this down. We call that decomposition. Okay, so if you don't know what decomposition is, essentially it's really straightforward. It's where we take a problem and break it down into smaller parts. So the first thing you need to do is use input to get the score as a number. Okay, so that will be the int input thing. Then you're going to write an if statement to test for the A grade. So you need to make sure if the score is over 85 or not. And remember to use greater than for this one. So greater than is pointing to the right. Then you're going to use elif for all the other ones. So they're going to be very similar. So if it's greater than 76, if it's greater than 63, but you are going to be, instead of putting if score is greater than 63, you'll put elif score is greater than 63. Okay, you must make sure, however, that it starts with if, otherwise this won't work. So let's look at the model answer for this question. So first of all, we need to get the score in. So I need a variable and I need to use int input in order to get this in as a integer. So please enter a score. Then let's do the first test. Now the first test is trivial because it's something very similar to what we've done already. So if score is greater or equal to 85, then print you have an A grade. Now the next one is over 76, so I'm going to go elif score is greater or equal to 76, print B. Now notice that I haven't used just if on its own, because if I did and I entered a score of maybe 88, then it will print out both print out A and B as well. So to continue the program on, I'm going to simply just copy and paste these. Now no one says you have to type this out yourself every time. So B, C, D, E, and F. And I'll just quickly change the scores. So 76, 63, 52, 44, and 33. Now finally, we need to do the U grade. So to do this, I simply will just put else. I could put another elif in there, but actually this is the end of the chain. If it's not any of the other grades, you've got failed. Therefore, else makes the most sense. So that is the model answer to the question that I've just set. So finally, here's a challenge task for you. Now the solution to this doesn't take much. The whole reason why this is a challenge is because you're going to have to completely code the if statement all by yourself. So you might find this challenge task really easy, but it's really just testing, can you write the if and then else correctly. So Enter the code below, so I will include this in my description on YouTube to a web page where you can actually get this code, so you don't have to type it out for yourself. And what the code should do is it's going to essentially pick two random numbers, which is what this code's doing here. I haven't talked about random and random int yet, but hopefully you can work out what that's doing. Another reason why this is probably a challenge task. Here I'm then printing off the question, so essentially taking the first number, putting a plus between them, and print out a second number. So it's kind of printing it as a question on the screen for the user to enter their answer. You then work out the answer yourself and place it inside a variable called answer, and then you finally ask the user to enter their answer. What you then have to do is see if these two are the same as one another. If they are, then print that is correct. If they're not, print incorrect. And here's the model answer for that question. As you can see, the if statement here is very short. We are comparing, using the equality check to see if the user answer and the answer are the same. And then if they are, you print out correct, otherwise else you print out incorrect. So notice that if they either are the same as one another or they're not. If you write something like if user answer does not equal answer, that is correct, it will still work. However, using else is the more correct way of actually doing it.